So you worked in areas all over the world, some of which have, let's say, checkered histories of labor rights. How do you make sure that construction, wherever you're doing it, is ethically administered?
For us, we know that we're working in a number of countries that have horrific human rights issues. And, while construction is a relatively small industry in so many of the places where we work, it is very important. I think it's everyone to take on the issue of human rights. And by the way, when we speak of human rights and we speak of some of these very checkered locations outside of the United States, there are very many locations in the United States that could also use a couple of lessons in human rights. But for our part as Turner, as we work in some locations that have made the news recently, we've asked the question, should we be there? And this isn't anything that we just go off and chase work. But as a board, as a group of executives, should we be there? Are we ignoring, the records of so many of the contractors that will come into those places and literally abuse the workers? Poor pay, poor living conditions, long hours, and many of the workers do not have an opportunity to move from job to job or to do what is best for them. It is what is best for the contractor. Our feeling is that as we participate in a project, and we participate in many projects in many locales where human rights are issues, worker rights are issues, that project, that community, is a better place for our participation because we do not turn a blind eye when we see rights abuses. Right from the beginning, as we select contractors, we attempt to select contractors on behalf of owners, and you have to have an owner who believes in what you believe in. Pick contractors on the basis of the way that they are going to hire, the way they're going to house, the way they're going to treat, retain their workers, the safety that they will provide for the workers as they're out on a job site. So I think with the emphasis that we place on human rights issues, on worker condition issues, the places where we work are better places for our participation. And I think it's important. I'm a proud United States citizen, and the United States is criticized often for taking up issues of human rights. I think that we have to lead by example, and that we have to go out there, and if in some small way we have an impact, I think it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And so we're not going to ignore those places with bad human rights. There may be some places where it's extraordinary and we have no chance of succeeding. But if we can at all impact the level of worker conditions, we should participate and we should work as hard as we can to make it a better community.
So what I hear you saying is it's as important to pick a good, or to work with a good team and owners and clients as it is to seek out projects. Have you ever turned down a project because of the chance of there being workers' rights abuses?
Yeah, sure. There are a number of projects that we're asked to participate in, and a number of them we do turn down, and they're for a host of issues, and human rights issues, worker condition issues are part of them. More than that, there are commercial ethic issues that are in play, and they all play hand in hand. If you're not commercially ethical, you're not going to be ethical with almost anything you treat.
What do you mean by commercially ethical?
Well, pay my brother, or hire my sister, or hire this particular contractor, even though he has no business being on a particular job site. And we try to stay away from that. We know that job is going to be a tainted job, and our potential for success is going to be limited. The moment that you say yes to something like that, you know what, you're tainted, and everyone in the community will know you're tainted, that you can be had. And you just can't put yourself in that situation. And people think, well, maybe it's pretty difficult, but it isn't. At the end of the day, it's like the drug campaign, just saying no. And so we say, just say no.
So do you think there should be global standards for human rights in the construction industry, and who should administer those and how?
I'm not sure about global standards. I think there are a number of standards out there that would work. I'd hate to think that we spend more of our time creating standards as opposed to enforcing standards that would work today. A lot of it's, it's so much education for so many of the contractors that we work with and so many of the cultures that we work within. In the UAE, they came out with a proposition for contractors the other day, and they said that we're going to rate workers' camps. And if you have a Class A rating on a worker camp, we're going to give you X number of dirham advantage in your bid on a public job. And if you're B level, it's a little less. But the idea is tying conditions for workers' camps and the way that we treat workers on a job site to your ability to secure projects, and it's a great idea. We queried one of the contractors, they were queried in the press actually, and said, what do you think of the idea? And the contractor's answer was, it's a great idea as long as it doesn't cost us anything. So, there's a long way to go educationally. And I think most important is to make the tie that if you treat people well, they will treat you well. The more that we put into education and training of our own staff, the higher the return that we have, the loyalty that we have, that people want to work for us and they stay for long periods of time. And that's the same with workers throughout the world. There are no particular people that are particularly better than anyone else. There is no advantage to hiring, one race or one culture over another. It's all on how you train, educate, and then incentivize people. And it's a lesson that's hard learned.
Let's change gears a little bit. What's
Sure.
been the most technically challenging project that you've worked on?
I don't know that there's one technically challenging project. Working with a client to best understand what his true goals are, and then helping him understand how we're going about to satisfy those goals, and that we need his support in doing that. If he's not supportive of us as we're looking to enforce a very rigid safety program on a project, it's pretty tough to do. We need to have his support. If we have his support for, it may be a safety program, or it may be holding a contractor to particular elements of quality on a project, we've won big. On the technical side, I know you're looking for me to give you a couple of examples. Burj Khalifa.
Of course.
Everyone likes to speak of the Burj. It's the world's tallest building, and it had many technical challenges because of literally the heights we were taking it to. One of the issues that we had with respect to the Burj was moving concrete from ground level up into the tower. And we pumped concrete something like 600 meters, which is taller than most buildings. Our idea on solving technical problems is the first thing you need to do in problem solving is identify the problem. And then we went out and we sought the help of the manufacturer of the concrete pumps. We sought the help of the general contractor. In this case, it was a tri-venture led by Samsung. We sought the help of a structural engineer. And we brought a number of other people into the mix. And we came up with a concrete mix that had the fluidity that allowed us to pump one pump. There were no booster pumps on the way up, pump 160 floors. A part of it was building the world's largest ice chip plant because we had to add a lot of ice to the mix in order to keep it cool.
Building in the desert, after all.
Building in the desert. But, it's interesting. You say building in the desert, and a lot of people think, okay, one of the challenges is that it gets to be ridiculously hot during the day. The problem is not only the heat, but it's the cold at night, particularly at the heights that we reach. So when you have a swing of 50 degrees, it really plays havoc with your concrete. So you have to be real careful about the admixtures that you put in, the way you place it. And sure, it's a technical challenge, but if you bring the right people to the table, there aren't too many technical challenges in our business that you can't solve. Some of it may take a little more money than an owner would like, but clearly if he wants to reach new heights, it becomes an issue. The other big challenge on that project was more of a logistical challenge. Now, if you think about it, you're putting thousands of workers to work at 100 stories plus on many of the days. You have to move all those men up. You have to have all the materials in place. You have to hoist equipment up there. And if you have a particular major activity on a particular day, and the night before they hoisted the wrong piece of steel, you could lose a day's work. You also have to have facilities for those people who are up in the tower. Every time someone's hungry or wants a coffee or is due for a coffee break or tea break or whatever it may be, you don't want them running down to the base of the building. So you have to build as you go in order to support that staff. So the issues become, daunting from a logistical and planning basis as much as they are technical issues with respect to the concrete mix. We also had an earthquake, which few people know about in the course of the building, and no one planned for an earthquake. So
how did you deal with it? Tell us about it, what happened.
As it turns out, the building itself, the structure of the building is unique, and the structure of the building by Bill Baker of SOM is just phenomenal. So we had a quake. I think if we could have done a better job securing a lot of the materials and equipment on the building. We didn't lose much of anything, but it just goes to show that, you've got to be prepared for almost anything. We're concerned with windstorms out of the desert, and here the earth shook in a place which has very little history of movement. So again, it's to be ready for any eventuality.
So having worked in so many places all over the world, are there any regions, cities, places that you're excited about as a new frontier for tall building development, construction management?
I think we're going to see buildings generally grow taller as more people migrate to the cities over the next several generations. I think it's important that in our industry we do more than understand how to build a building, how to build it taller, or it has to be built efficiently. It also has to be built to meet the needs of the community. We work in many parts of the world where the clients aren't as sophisticated as clients you may have in the US or the UK, or more, I don't want to say sophisticated places, but where they've had a great deal more experience in building buildings. And we have to make sure that the programs that we design from and build from, those programs that lay out how much office, what type of office, how many apartments, what type of apartments, hotel, retail, educational facilities, meets the needs of the community, then it meets the needs of the client. Because if it doesn't work for the community, it doesn't work for the client. And if it doesn't work for the client, then it's going to be a stupid building. Someone else is building on ego as opposed to need. I think we'll see tall buildings in places like Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. We're working on a very tall building program in Thailand. These places have the need, and they have the appetite, and they have the ability. It's nice when you mesh a company such as ours. We allow a client to build out his building, maximizing the use of local and regional resources, because they bring in the bulk or the brawn, we bring in the brains. So you match the brains that we can bring in with the brawn that they can apply, and you know what? You can build a building less expensive. You can build a building that utilizes local talent and local skills. You can build up that base of local talent and skill for the next high-rise building. It's correct politically, socially, economically. It's really the kind of thing that we should do. So, for me, as we look at buildings around the world, be they tall buildings or huge programs, I think we want to look at them on the basis of what makes sense for the client, and we should test him on it before he goes out there and says, well, I want to build a hotel. I've asked the client, and Sadia said, well, why do you want to do that? And he was giving us the job. We killed it because it made no sense. He allowed us to do a financial feasibility study, and it was just the dumbest building he could put up. So it has to make sense, and we have to do more than just chase the next assignment. We have to make sure that it's the right assignment that works for our clients and that works for the community. not only the shareholder, but the stakeholders, who are all the people who are impacted by that building.
Should we have worldwide building codes?
I don't know that we need worldwide building codes. I'll give you an example. You know, we talk about the failures of building codes in places like Turkey when they have a big earthquake and you see buildings tumbling down. And in other places around the world, Taiwan does arguably a little bit better. And it's not so much the building code, and we heard, change the code, improve the code. It's not the code, it's the inspection. To know that the architect, engineers, clients, and contractors are living to the codes that are in place.
Enforcement.
So it has less to do with the code itself, and it has more to do with the enforcement of the code. You enforce the code in so many of these places where we work, and you know what? It'll be a much better place, much better building, much better community. So I speak ethics in the broadest sense, and that is an ethical issue as well, for inspectors to enforce the codes as they know them, as opposed to maybe allowing contractors to slide on the codes. And it's a key, and we can't turn our back on it. And we don't, other people can't.
Thank you so much.